We'll call the meeting to order, and please show that all members are present. Public comments on non-agenda items. Mr. Mosier.
Chair Gardner, members of the committee, my name is Jim Mosier, and I want to call to your attention the fact that last night the City Council adopted some amendments to a document called Council Policy A2, which is rules governing the appointment to and conduct of boards, commissions, and committees. The amendments they made had to do mostly, actually entirely, with separating private from official communications, the purpose of which was to enable the city attorney to defend a public official who wanted to deny the use of their personal social media presence to people that they don't like. However, the rules apply even to people like myself who don't have a social media presence. So I am perhaps even tonight supposed to tell you any comments I made or I will make are my own opinions and not a statement of any official position, even though I am one of the very low-rung council appointees. But the broader point I made to them, I'm not sure any of the GPAC members or even the steering committee members are aware of this document that has fairly extensive rules in it about how we are supposed to conduct ourselves. And so perhaps on some future agenda, it should be brought to the attention, both of this committee and the GPAC, that there is such a thing. And I also commented, it mentions we're supposed to adhere to the Brown Act, but we actually have never had any training on what that requires us to do, as far as I can recall. So, but there's nothing in the policy requiring us to have that.
Okay, that's interesting because they used to do a primer for all the committee members. They'd come in and say, this is how you have to do it with this, la, la, la. So they don't do that anymore, I guess?
I think you've been to all the GPAC meetings, and it has not
Right,
happened there.
that's true. Okay, good point. Let's do a little brief update on that.
Yeah, we can look into that
Okay.
and distribute
Great.
the information.
Any other public comments on non-agenda items? All right. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Second?
Seconded.
Are there any public comments on the minutes? If not, we deem them approved. All right, the Arts and Cultural Historical Resources Subcommittee recap. I think it's all clear here. Staff, do you have any particular presentations or comments you want to make on this?
No, just that we believe the attachment in the agenda presents a full record of what transpired from the Arts and Cultural Historical Resources Subcommittee as it relates to both of those existing conditions and background analysis reports.
Whoever does the minutes, or whatever entity does the minutes, must be the same one that does my voicemail things. So it was Crystal Cove State Part at one point and stuff. Does anybody actually read these and check them? I mean, as far as, because some of them don't make a whole lot of sense in the minutes.
So the individual, just so everyone knows, the individual subcommittee liaisons on city staff prepare these themselves, and so oftentimes they're rushed, and maybe spell check is something we can work on, but they are self-prepared in-house by city staff.
All right, thank you. All right, any questions or comments? Public comments?
My only question is, so just so I understand the process, so what happens from here?
So good question, and this is a good time to bring that up at the front of these items. So these existing conditions and background analysis reports are prepared by Dudek, the city's consultant, and they are intended to start the conversation, so to speak, on these topics and act as an existing snapshot of these various topics within the city. What's happening, where are some opportunities that may be overlooked, and what are some best practices in the planning world for these various elements. So these are not the end-all be-all in terms of these topics. They're really just intended to provide an accurate portrayal of arts and culture and historical resources in the city as it stands today, and serve as a conversation starter as we are going out to the community for outreach, soliciting feedback on various topics, and ultimately informing the vision on each of these topical areas. So this is not a policy document. This is just a conversation starter.
And I think a second part of it is that I use these and highlight certain items to go to the council just to see if there's any issues that they have. They may want to say, no, we don't want you to go down that path or something. So that's the other aspect of it. Charles?
Hi there, Chair Gardner, Charles Klob. I can attest as chair of this committee that you're about to hear on that the minutes were sent to me for my perusal. I made comments on them. The comments were incorporated into the minutes. So that is happening.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Chair Gardner. This afternoon, I looked at the DUDEC contract because I was a little confused. The reason I'm confused is I thought that these background reports were supposed to be informed by some interviews with important stakeholders in the city. Maybe I'm misunderstanding how the outreach works. And in particular, I thought in the contract there was something about that they were going to go to the relevant boards and commissions that oversee these things and make a presentation that the general plan update was in progress. So at the Arts Commission meeting last Thursday, I mentioned to them that this historical resources element and a previous arts and culture thing I thought was on here, but I guess that was not. I don't think had ever heard anything about this. And I also, the day before at the Harbor Commission meeting, mentioned that at our GPAC meeting we saw a background report was coming up on the harbor element. They again had no notion that such a thing was happening. So, and I personally remember telling them that I thought the consultant was going to come and make a presentation to them. And so I'm wondering, as the steering committee, it apparently didn't happen in the past. Is that still happening in the future? Or what is going on with consulting with these people who are supposed to have expertise in these areas?
That's a good point, because it has been something that we talked about. Staff, any update on that?
I don't have the DUDEC contract right in front of me, but I would note that there are multiple phases to the general plan update. And I think as the movement towards a vision, goal setting comes forward, there was a distinction that at that point in time, we'd go out to the various bodies and boards. However, I do think it's important that they know that this is happening. So I can definitely go back and revisit that with DUDEC.
Okay, and certainly we have had at the subcommittee meetings people coming in, usually staff members from different departments with various expertise to provide some background. So that has been done. But yes, you're right, Jim. Thank you for pointing that out, that we need to get out and get these other groups, because that was part of the plan. Any other comments? All right, moving on. The resilience report recap. Any questions from up here? Yes,
So this was one of them that was not confirmed, I thought, resilience.
What has been decided through this subcommittee and the GPAC itself is that resilience will be woven through the entire general plan, and there will not be a separate resilience or sustainability element, but all these. And one of the things that came out at, I'm trying to remember which subcommittee meeting it was, but that Jim pointed out that oftentimes, these things many times will appear in different elements, and you don't necessarily know the reference. And so I thought it was a great idea that we were going to use little icons and say, this also appears in, you have a boat or something for the harbor element and that sort of thing. So, but you're right, it's not a separate thing. But because resilience was such a topic, they presented a basic and then showed the different areas where it would be occurring.
Thank you.
Public comment? All right. A recreational natural resources subcommittee recap. Any questions from up here? Any public comments on this? All right. And,
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
oh,
Mr.
I'm
Loge has
sorry,
a
Jim, go
comment.
ahead.
Yeah, I'm on this subcommittee, so perhaps this is not the place to bring it up, but at the time of the last subcommittee meeting, I saw in Dudek's recommendation, they say we're a little weak on view protection and identification of views in our city. And the general plan says we try to protect views not only of the coast and ocean, but also of canyons, mountains, and so forth. And if you look at the map that we have in there, it has only coastal views, and it has no coastal views south or east of Old Corona del Mar. As if there was
Nothing
no
exists
view of the
beyond
ocean.
that. Nothing
Yeah.
exists beyond the old Newport Beach, the
Yes.
original.
Yes, and nothing that it's a view of a canyon
Right.
or a mountain identified anywhere.
I
And
think
the
that's a
map-
good thing to bring up at the subcommittee meeting.
Yes. So it is indeed something that we need input on as to where the.
But you might make a note of that
finds
to
those.
Dudek, that they might go back and look and see if there are others that have been maybe identified in the past that we somehow didn't get on there.
And I think that's a very great point. And again, this report, although it's deemed finalized, so to speak, I made note of that comment, and that'll be something we can definitely vet out further as we move through the process.
Okay, good. Yeah.
But it was noted early on that they would include all the other view corridors, correct?
Yes,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
but they didn't end up there, so.
Okay.
And that's why you have review processes, because you pick up on things like that. All right, noise subcommittee. Any questions about the noise? The chair is here. Any comments from the chair?
Yes, definitely. I think the noise element is sometimes regarded as kind of the neglected stepchild of general plans, sort of tacked on as a state requirement, but not really something that's somehow a lot of attention applied to. But I did want to mention last night at the council meeting, Councilmember Brad Avery, sitting where Kimberly is now sitting, was talking about a loss of a tree at the Balboa Branch Library and how that affected people. And he was saying how tough it was to deal with the changes that happened in the city and the immense changes that had happened in the last 20 years. And the first word out of his mouth about this, about what was hard to adjust to, was just with the intensity of the noise, was the first thing he mentioned. The jet traffic, the car traffic, and the housing that's being built out to the max because people see their houses as investments rather than homes. So noise was important to him, it's important to me, and I think we have very little support for this element. And I'm hoping when I make a more coherent statement of what we need support for, that there will be some support forthcoming. At the subcommittee meeting, I thought that the city actually has no on-call noise consultant who could inform us about anything, but I discovered that we actually do. And we have an on-call contract with a, I think, well-qualified noise engineer for airport noise matters, and perhaps that person could be used to inform us about land compatibility. I think he knows about traffic noise as well as airplanes. So we might draw on that resource if we had a capability to do that.
I also think that if you ask people, if you ask staff where the most complaints are, probably noise related, so it is a very important element.
Yes.
Any other comments? All right, the land use element update. Let me explain why this is on here. As a state mandate, if a builder provides a certain number of affordable units, and they get bonus units. And we have a white paper circulated, has been circulating, points out that those bonus units do not count against the overall number. They are in, the way we're counting them at least, they're in addition. And that, when that was brought up at the GPAC meeting, there was a lot of raised eyebrows because somehow all the sharp eyes didn't notice that, and wanted it on the next agenda. And I had some questions for Ben, because I want to be sure that when the Land Use Element Subcommittee, we'll probably look at it first, but the General Plan Advisory Committee as a whole, when they address it, we have as much information in terms of procedures and other things so that decisions are made on the basis of facts and not on the basis of emotion. Because if we could just decide emotionally, we'd all go, yeah, we want to do it the other way. But so the first question I had was,
May I ask
Yeah,
for
no.
clarification? When you say count against, do you mean in terms of the total number of housing we need to produce, or zoning, parking, et cetera? Yeah.
so we have the numbers in our housing element. Say the airport is 2,500, say. So they build, there's another 1,000 bonus units for some reason. We'll just use that. So they could build then 3,000 overall units. That would be the overall number instead of 2,000, because if we just keep going, that wouldn't count. We wouldn't be able to say, stop, we've reached our number.
But wouldn't we still get credit for those 3,000 toward arena numbers?
Oh yeah, we get credit, but the point.
Yeah, I understand it. It
We
makes
end
it
up with a lot more
larger-
houses,
yes.
right, which was the concern. So, unfortunately, we are at this point pretty far down the road. So, Ben, if for some reason GPAC said we want to make a change, and we went through who all has to look at it and what are the timeframes?
Thank you, Chair Gardner. So I did prepare a slide to show our current schedule, and this
Okay.
is, sorry, it's a little hard to see because the font changed on me, but you'll see that tomorrow we actually have our Airport Land Use Commission hearing. They are simply reviewing for consistency or inconsistency with the John Wayne Airport Environs Land Use Plan. I have a pretty good inkling they're going to find it inconsistent, which will then mean that we have to take the matter to City Council and look to have a notice of intent to override authorized by Council. We would then send out the notice of intent to override. There's a 45-day mandated waiting period, during which point in time ALUC, as well as the Caltrans State Division of Aeronautics, would have the ability to comment on the city's intent to override and share their concerns. And we would have to bring those comments into our approval resolutions for the council to consider. So that 45 days puts us in a tight spot because we're now looking at a July 23rd council hearing with the ultimate deadline, because of the Charter Section 423 electorate vote, being August 9th at 5 o'clock, actually delivering the resolutions to the county to call a consolidated municipal election. The reason that's important is if we look at any other schedule, let's say we make a change, and I should back up, going to the Airport Land Use Commission, directly asking the question, if we were to make such a change, what would that entail? And the answer was re-review by ALUC. So any changes to the document that they have on their agenda for tomorrow cannot be accommodated without going to a separate hearing. If you look at going to an ALUC hearing in June, we now have to go to council July 9th for notice of intent to override. The 45 days puts us beyond the August 9th deadline to call an election with the county. So that puts us in a spot where we are not able to make the schedule that we've been working towards this entire effort. So to go back to your original question, ALUC would have to re-review those changes at a separate hearing. The first being June 20th, because they would not consider holding a special hearing for our item alone. So hopefully that provides some context for your question.
Ben, question. So I'm guessing the dispute with ALUC, where the city council wants to override, has to do with residential, with housing?
Yeah, so the way I like to describe it, ALUC, Airport Land Use Commission, has to put the airport's best interests at heart. Same with the Coastal Commission. They put the Coastal Act and coastal access best interests at heart. So any sensitive users that could potentially complain about noise and be sensitive receptors to noise in the area, they don't want to see that being closer to the airport or even amplified in the airport.
I guess my second point, though, to Nancy's point, is if there's a reduction in the number of units, does that have to go to a vote?
When you say vote, are you talking about the
To ALUC?
Yes.
Does it have to go in front of ALUC again?
Yeah, and we asked that question directly because I think logically you're correct. It seems like it'd be better for them if there were less units potentially in the airport area, but the answer we got consistently from ALUC staff who consulted with ALUC's legal counsel is that we would have to come back for any change that deals with density, intensity, building standards, or allowed land uses.
And if we were to provide a reduction in units, they wouldn't be willing to call a special session?
I haven't asked them directly, but I don't know that they would be willing to help us with a special meeting.
Because we're always overriding.
I know, but it's in their
You'd think so.
benefit.
You'd think so.
Okay, thank you.
So what then is the process of the intent to override or the override? I apologize, I don't know how this interplays.
No worries. It's probably good for the public benefit as well. So ALUC reviews, again, a project as small as, the singular residential projects we've had in the airport area for consistency with their land use plan. Most of the time they're looking at noise impacts as well as proximity to the airport in terms of safety zones. There are various safety zones that kind of transect the airport area, and they all have to do with turning motions and turning movements of aircraft. And based on the closeness to the airport runway, there are higher safety zones that are intended to have less occupants. So that being, like a personal storage use, for example, could be a good use there. But having a sensitive noise receptor like a single unit residence right next to the airport runway is not a good thing in their eyes. So they would be looking to determine that inconsistent with their land use plan, which is not a disapproval of the project. At the end of the day, the city council has the authority to be the final action. But as part of the Public Utilities Code, the council has to hold 2 public hearings, one being a notice of intent to override, issuing that formal notice to ALUC and Caltrans, accepting their comments, and then bringing it back for a second hearing to actually do the override as part of the project approval. Does that make sense?
A couple of questions. Where exactly in the land use element is the language that tells how we count them?
So it's referenced in what I believe is now policy 4.4.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I don't have a slide showing that
That's
for
right.
you. But there's a reference at the end of the policy that talks about density bonus units being excluded for the purpose of density calculations. And it translates directly to the overlay language that goes with it.
Okay. And the second question is, we've done a CEQA study. Did we analyze the numbers with bonus units added? In other words, did we just look at what we've called out in the housing element, or did we take into consideration that there would be bonus elements in looking at that area?
That's a great question. So the project description talks about density bonus units and how they're treated for the environmental impact report. It is speculative, to say the least, to think about how many density bonus units will come online. And so the EIR has been conservatively prepared in the sense that it is completely additive to all the existing development on the ground today. So there's no speculative project that removes an office building and brings back residential units. So because that residential project is now on top of the existing commercial uses that are there today, and that's how the analysis works, it's overly conservative, and our CEQA consultant wrote it into the project description such that that conservative approach covers any anticipated density bonus units that may be coming online through state density bonus law. So to answer your question, it doesn't directly state. That's what I said. Yeah, the project description has a statement that addresses it, as I mentioned, and because of the conservative nature of the EIR.
Hold on. Conservative here, I always can go 2 ways.
Sure.
Conservative.
It means they loaded it up
Exactly.
for traffic, air quality,
Yeah.
noise, all of that.
Sorry, yes. It's over analyzing, so to speak, overestimating what kind of development would come online, and that provides.
Okay, so
the
it
buffer.
wasn't just looking at the very narrowest numbers.
Yes, sorry for the long-winded
That's
answer. I understand what you're asking.
I thought that's what you meant, but I wanted to be sure.
Hey, so this is probably not under our jurisdiction, but The EIR covers a certain number of housing units that could be built. You can always build less. That's number one. And number two, if you're overriding ALUC, what does it matter if the city ends up doing something smaller?
So I don't think it matters if we end up doing something smaller. It's just how the policy language reads, because the Public Utilities Code is very clear that amendments to the general plan and changes to zoning regulations must be reviewed by ALUC. And unfortunately, because we go to ALUC tomorrow, any changes thereafter expose us to say that we didn't go to ALUC to consider those changes, and now we're not compliant with state law, frankly.
Yeah, I think I'm talking post, after all of this is done.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that says that all of this housing will have to be constructed and then we're there out of compliance with our plan. If something less happens, then we've accommodated up to the maximum, and it includes that lower scope.
Anything else? Public comment?
Nancy Scarborough, thank you, Chair and Committee. So if we want to change the overlays so that when we reach the limit of the overlays, that caps it, do we have to have another general plan amendment after this all happens, or is that built into this EIR? I have never been really clear on that.
Sorry, can you restate that in a different way, maybe?
Yeah, I know this is. If we want to cap the areas by area, right now, I think we're doing it by area. If we want to cap those units at that limit, is the way the EIR and the policy written right now, does it actually accomplish that the way it is, or do we have to come back after the election and do something else?
Yeah, no, the EIR is very specific, and that's why the development limits were extremely important, because without that, it's hard to have a project description. So those unit limits that are identified in the housing element and in the proposed policies are very much tied to the EIR, and nothing higher was contemplated.
Okay.
Chair Gardner, my first comment is our HCD certified housing element actually contemplated and apparently approved by HCD that we might have a two-election process. In other words, we may have one election that may fail, and then after that election fails, we told them that we would be reevaluating what we were putting before voters and have a second election. So I'm not sure this is completely the disaster that it looks like. If they accept that, although it would put us behind certain deadlines, so it would be important separately, which does not require voter approval, for the city council to adopt the, whatever they're called, objective design standards. Because if there were by right development allowed at our opportunity sites, which we hadn't rezoned for, those objective standards would still apply. So the outcome would not be a whole lot different than if we approved this or if people were doing it by right, because we have limited control anyway. But we could be enacting those objective design standards. Another comment is, I haven't thought it through clearly, but bonus units are by definition something above and beyond what is allowed in the general plan. But since we anticipate, and in fact we told HCD that 30% of what we build is going to be affordable units eligible for the bonus, and if builders are building that, they're likely going to ask for the bonus, we could lower our limits considerably so that the general plan allows a lower limit than we originally told HCD, and if they ask why we lowered the limit, it's because we think that we're going to get credit for bonus units. So that's a possible measure that could go on the second election if the first is rejected. And another possibility, I don't know how it actually would work, is that the state requirement, according to our housing element, we are anticipating enough above market units to easily satisfy our requirement. And the only outstanding requirement is 2,707 moderate, low, and very low income units. And we could ask people, the measure could be just for those affordable units. I don't know how that would work, but that's another possibility for that second election. And then the other comment I wanted to make is about the wisdom of overriding the Airport Land Use Commission. And again, I'm speaking as a private citizen, not as a GPAC member. But as a private citizen, I would have hoped as a result of the general plan update process that we were moving towards stronger policies to mitigate aviation noise and hoping for better cooperation with the county and the airport. And it's very difficult to be advocating for relief when we are announcing to the world that we think living with high airport noise is a good thing to do. And so that contradiction really bothers me. And if I were imagining I were a GPAC member, I would be bothered by that.
Oh, hold on a minute. So I don't want to be sure I'm understanding what you're thinking. That the city say, okay, so everything goes down in flames in the first election. And then the city calls a special election?
That is what our housing element says in it we will do. Yes. It's one of the action items in the housing element. For those who have read the housing element. I don't have it in my mind clearly,
I'm not
which action it
doubting
is.
that. I'm trying to think of, though, because the other thing is, one of our big concerns is that our housing element becomes decertified. Or at least one of my concerns is because there are all sorts of things that can happen. And it takes time to put on even a special election if you're doing it in your own city. But at what point, aren't we supposed to forget the election? But when are we supposed to have everything done? What, February we have to have a...
That's correct, February 2025, and I'm happy to provide more context on that policy as well, or that discussion in the housing element if you'd like, Chair.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So the housing element...
You can
as
sit
you
down,
know-
Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. As you know, the housing element was adopted in September of 2022. We were very rose-colored glasses, and we're hoping for a March 2024 election. So yes, in the housing element, it actually says that we would be taking this to election in March 2024. And if that were to fail, we would take a second bite at the apple, so to speak, with a different project description and try again. However, obviously that March 2024 date did not come to fruition, largely due to the process in doing CEQA and everything that is entailed in this effort. So yes, the housing element does contemplate 2 votes, but that, I just want to make clear, was for a very much earlier time frame than we're on now.
But, so it's specified March and then something following.
Yeah, I think it actually... Yeah, it just said that if the March vote fails, that we would do a subsequent election. It doesn't tie us to a second date.
No. Well, I wonder if we could say, well, okay, November, and then can we have a second bite of the apple? All right, but that's a clarification. Philip?
The only thing I'd say is, to Mr. Mosher's point, I do believe the general plan does include bonus units because it's tied to the EIR, and the EIR includes the bonus units, so how could it not be included?
I could be mistaken, and our planners are much more clear on this than I am. I think the definition of what a bonus unit is in the state law and in our zoning ordinance is that it's something above the limit allowed in a local general plan. So I think it's...
I believe it's what's allowed per zoning, but the general plan includes the updated EIR, which should include the bonus units. Is that not correct, Ben?
Yeah, so the EIR, as we mentioned earlier, the project description does reference the density bonus units. And I think what is interesting about density bonus is it's typically done above and beyond the base density or base units that are afforded. And I think that's one thing I also would like to mention as it relates to including density bonus units towards the overall development limit. We did confer with the city attorney's office, and there is some concern about doing that as proposed, and that's simply, again, taking the density bonus units and counting them towards the overall development limit. There's some ambiguity in state density bonus law that may make that not consistent with state law if we were to make that change. And further, there's concern that it poses a risk to the city not meeting RENA obligations through the no net loss requirements, where we'd have to rezone other sites if we were to lose affordable sites that were flagged through the housing inventory of opportunity sites. So long-winded answer to your question, but the short of it is that density bonus is typically counted above and beyond the base, and that's consistent in planning practice. And that's kind of why it's written as it is today, which is also consistent with the 2,200 units that are afforded to the airport area today. That limit does not include density bonus units. Anything that's produced through density bonus law is above and beyond that 2,200 cap that's in the airport area today.
Do we know any cities that are counting it differently, counting it the way we'd all like it to be counted?
I do not off the top of my head, but we'd be happy to look into that too.
Would it be possible just check with 2 or 3 cities? I mean, I don't want you to make it, but just get a sense of whether everybody else is interpreting the law in the same way our city attorney's office is?
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, thanks. Public comment, continuing?
I wanted to, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I wanted to...
Name is Susan DeSantis.
Yes, sorry. Member of the General Plan Update Committee. I wanted to ask if the staff could provide some information on a recent election that was held in Yorba Linda, where they had 2 measures on the ballot dealing with RENA. Are you familiar with that?
No, we're not. We're familiar, I think, with the first vote that failed. However, we're not familiar with the second vote and the outcome, or if they've held it yet.
Well, they had 2 competing measures on the ballot. And they, I think once it failed, they went back. They had a citizen committee that helped the city council and staff to come up with an alternative that was acceptable to the community, which went on the ballot. So the second time they had the election, there were 2 measures, and the community voted for the alternative. And I thought we should take a look at that and be able to see if there are any correlations with what we're trying to accomplish here in terms of trying to understand what the best way forward is for our November vote. I'm not sure we are clear on it.
Do we know what the reaction has been, say, from the state on the election? Have they, since they selected an alternative that may not have been part of their housing element?
The alternative may not have been that different from what the city council was originally putting forward, but it did at that point have community buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were able to bring it forward and get a supportive vote with the community serving as a means of generating support. So, I think part of the concern we have talked about at the General Plan Update Committee is being able to explain this to the community in a way that they will understand, because it's challenging even for us to get our arms around it. And I know, and I think this is related, we're going to be looking at this issue of the bonus units at the Land Use Committee. Is that correct? At the Land Use Subcommittee meeting?
It was going to depend on the outcome of this evening's discussion, but the primary purpose of the Land Use Element Subcommittee is to review the existing conditions and background analysis report. That is something we could also discuss at that meeting, but that was not going to be the primary purpose of that subcommittee meeting.
Okay, well, I would like to request that at a minimum, that we have a clear understanding of what the difference is by looking at the airport area as an example and to understand what the implications are for the bonus units to be counted under the cap and not counted, and to be able to see it in the form of a chart so that we're all clear on what the implication is. The other point I would make is I think a reasonable position for the state to take is to look at the efforts that Newport Beach has been taking, which have been significant, and that if you were to ask them, that they would say, we're looking for forward movement, and we would be taking forward movement. And whether the calendar shifts a little bit by a couple of months, I don't know that that is as serious an issue as many people think. That's just my perspective on it, personal perspective.
Thank you. Any other public comment? I think it's important for the subcommittee to have this on the agenda. And I don't think it should take up the whole agenda. But I think that you've heard the comments tonight. I think what you provided was very good. The fact of how the city attorney is interpreting it, that sort of thing. But you've also heard some of the other concerns, because then they can make a recommendation, one way or the other at least, to GPAC, which I think is the way we've been operating anyway. Does that meet with your approval? Okay, all right. So that's what, and we can talk about that. All right.
But how does that fit into this time frame?
They're meeting next week, right?
Yeah, the meeting, I'll have it on the slide coming up, but May 23rd.
Okay. Yeah, so pretty quickly. All right. All right, and finally, the overview of upcoming deliverables, objectives, and outreach.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Gardner. So I'll start with outreach, just because I think that we have some pretty exciting and impressive figures to share, and these were shared with the General Plan Advisory Committee at its April 30th meeting. But through the 5 pop-up event booths that we've had, we've engaged about 350 adults, and the reason we say adults is there are plenty of kids that were also engaged. I think what's kind of fun about that is I think Cairns and West has done a really great job about coming up with creative activities that bring in the kids, and then as a parent, you're stuck. And what are you going to do beyond talking? So go ahead, Chair.
I was going to say, you liaise with the outreach committee, and I was talking in another meeting, totally different subject, but he was talking about sort of a game theory thing where he was trying to determine on another issue public sentiment. And they did the thing where you say, here's your pot of money, and here are the 10 or 15 things you can spend it on, put your priorities. And they got a really good result. And I thought I don't know whether it's something Kearns and West has ever used, but I thought that sounded like something interesting. So you might pass it on to them. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, so I think it's great, too, that the website has gotten a lot of traction. And I wanted to point out that nearly half of the website visits have come since we started the pop-up event outreach effort. And we've gotten a significant increase in questionnaire contributors as well as interactive map contributions. If you haven't checked out the interactive map, it's pretty striking and fun to look at. There's a lot of markers for opportunities to improve, as well as things people love and things that are important to the community members. I also think it's great to share that we've reached over 40,000 people through all the different facets of advertisements we've done. A fun fact that's not on here, I think the biggest uptick actually occurred when Grace included it at the forefront of her city managers the Week in Review newsletter. So we're looking to do another one of those coming soon, if not this week, perhaps next. So just wanted to provide a little perspective on the outreach.
I think one thing that might help, because it's come up in the GPAC meetings is that the GPAC members themselves, a lot of them were very active on social media. And it might be helpful if Kearns and West prepared, I don't know, a half dozen or so sort of whatever you call them on social media, but so that people didn't necessarily have to make up their own if they wanted to just spread something that might be helpful to them.
And make sure you have those graphics. They're shared with John Pope, the public information manager for the city, and I think we could look at sharing those with the members as well.
Yeah,
So
that'd be
thanks for
good
doing
because that gets it out even farther.
Yes.
Okay.
And then going on from outreach, I just wanted to share some upcoming events. So our last pop-up event for this phase 1 component of the outreach is a very exciting water polo event at Battle in the Bay. It's actually founded and put on by one of GPAC's own members, Laird Hayes. It starts at 3:30, and there's an open invitation for the community to come, including GPAC and steering committee members. We're told that they're anticipating between 500 and 600 attendees this year, which is up from 400 last year. So Kearns and West is planning to have at least 4 staff members there. DUDEC will have a team there, and we'll have some city staff there, so we'll be well staffed. Just some insight into the activity. They're actually, I'm going to start with the swag, because they're offering a water polo keychain that has Newport Together and Battle in the Bay marketing on it, which I think is pretty neat. But beyond that, the activity involves beach balls, throwing it to community members, and when they catch it, the closest question to their left thumb is what they have to answer, and we're going to jot down the answer to that question. So I think it'll be fun and interactive and kind of sporty, so they're doing a good job of that. We think that that'll get a lot of traction. We also anticipate having a laptop available there so people can do the interactive map at the event, which is something we haven't tried before. I think that's maybe been a lost opportunity, but we're going to try it here. From a subcommittee standpoint, again, we talked about this land use subcommittee. We have a meeting scheduled next Thursday at 3:30 p.m. I do want to note that is a hybrid meeting, so if you don't want to make the trip down to City Hall, you can tune in via Teams. Generally, it works pretty well. We've had a bug here and there, but for the most part, I think that's been well received, so you can attend remotely or in person. And then lastly, we're working very hard to schedule safety, Harbor and Bay, and a noise subcommittee, which I have not yet reached out to Chair Mosier about yet. But I do want to note, just from the noise subcommittee perspective, I think it's important to share that I've engaged with DUDEC to get a little bit more attention on the noise element after our first subcommittee meeting. And they've actually tapped their in-house acoustician to do an analysis of our existing general plan noise element and point out some possible deficiencies and areas for improvement. So although we might not have a robust existing conditions and background analysis report for that noise element, we will have a qualified and expert professional reviewing it for adequacy and maybe some areas for change and opportunity for improvement. So those all will be coming online. If we keep the June 5th General Plan Advisory Committee date, it's likely that only the Land Use Subcommittee report will be on that meeting, but maybe that's enough given the nature of the discussion.
Well, we had discussed the timing because I know you wanted to move it and maybe be able to get some more of the subcommittee meetings. Given the time frame, I mean, a week or two here and there it doesn't seem to make a lot of difference with. So I don't know that it matters. What Ben was saying, that because we've only got one subcommittee meeting scheduled, that would be the topic, the whole topic, basically, of the next GPAC meeting. But if we move the GPAC meeting to a week or two later, we could squeeze in some more of these and have more discussion on these elements. So any thoughts on that? So we can set it up, but yeah, if we can be flexible on that, I think, because as I say, the timing, I had hoped that you were going to say, well, if we do it right now, we're home free, and that's obviously not the case. So,
and then just to tack on to that, I did have your next steering committee meeting following the every other month sort of schedule. So if you wanted to meet directly after GPAC.
Yeah, so that was my other suggestion,
Okay.
because if GPAC, after looking at all this information, says, hey, we still want to make a change, then I would want to go to council immediately, alert them so they can either go, breaks, guys, no, or, okay, we'll go forward with it, and how do we work it? So if that's all right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, good. All right.
Thank you.
Comments on this section?
Nancy Scarborough again. Back to the outreach. we've had these pop-ups, we've had in reactions on the website. How is that information going to be combined and presented back to the subcommittees? I haven't heard any. I mean, we're reaching out to these people. If the information never gets back to us,
Right.
we're not going to do anything with it. So how is that going to happen?
That's a great question. So we actually have a standing meeting with DUDEC, of course, to check in, and that was the topic for today, was discussing how the feedback is going to be captured and summarized. So what's going to happen is at the conclusion of the pop-up event effort, as well as the conclusion of the subcommittee review of the existing conditions and background reports, there will be a combined summary document of the first phase of outreach, which includes these existing condition reports and the feedback received from not only the community but the subcommittee members. So that would be presented in draft form for the GPAC in a very comprehensive manner that just collects every piece of feedback we've received, again, from both community members online at these pop-up events, as well as subcommittee members and subcommittee meetings, and GPAC members and steering committee members at their meetings, respectively.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi.
wanna
I'm
give your name?
Virginia Andrews
Thank you.
Elmore. I come from Newport Shores. I'm a resident. One of the things that, because I had attended several of the general planning advisory committee meetings, they had talked about putting information in the newsletters of the HOAs, homeowner associations, and I noticed I haven't seen one in ours, because I think that would promote people going to the website and, putting in their input and, getting their questions maybe. And I just, I'm not sure where I should bring this up, but.
No, this is the
But
spot.
that I haven't seen, so I'm kind of worried.
All right, let's make a note of that, because I know the city has a list of all the homeowners associations. And a lot of times you just send it to the master community association, and it's pretty easy. Thank you.
And the other
Yes.
thing about housing, after last night's city council meeting and the people that came to talk about the mooring fees and how many people of middle class, affordable living, that because of the increase of that fees, they will lose their ability to moor their boat because they can't afford it. And I don't know how, I don't know how the residents or, housing is counted, but all those middle class and retired people that are living on their boats are now going to need housing if we push them off the bay.
All right, thank you. Any other public comments on this?
Chair Gardner, I myself attended only one of the pop-ups, and I wasn't exactly a member of the public attending it, because I was recognized as a GPAC member. So I'm wondering if the 350 adult contacts, does Kearns and West collect contact information from them, like an email address to contact them back with information about what's going on? And more generally, from the website, has it grown an email contact list? And the reason I'm asking that, again, looking at the contract this afternoon, I don't know if it's still in the plan, but originally DUDEC was promising they were going to hold 6 public workshops focused on the various elements. And such a list would be a good way to remind people that there's an opportunity to attend those, because it's always a problem getting attendance when you try to have a workshop. There was supposed to be a visioning workshop, one on the arts and culture and historical element, one on the recreation and harbor and bay, and one on the safety and sustainability elements. And then later, when we had policies, 2 more workshops focused on what policies would be recommended as a result of those. So were supposed to be public input workshops, so it would be good, I would think, to notify the people who had bothered to attend a pop-up and let them know that there are these other opportunities.
I don't remember them doing the one I attended, gathering email addresses.
We advertise the Stay Informed portion of the website, which does afford the opportunity for people to put their email contact in. And furthermore, when they're filling out the questionnaire, they can do that as well. So we are collecting email information when people engage online. I don't believe they're asking people for email addresses if they're providing comments in person, rather sharing that they can sign up to stay informed.
Okay. You might ask them if their experience, if they've done this before at pop-up events, and whether that's worthwhile to have a sheet there. Although I usually find that I can't read the handwriting of people who've left their messages anyway, their addresses.
The other part of the question was how large has the list become? That they've how many do you know how many people have supplied addresses so that we could reach out to through the website?
I don't have the number available, but I'd be happy to report back.
Any other comments on this issue? All right. Any committee announcements or matters you want placed on a future agenda? Then we will be adjourned.